Countdown to Halloween 2023, featuring eerie and uncanny tales of haunts, ghosts, and suspense. October is finally here. Join us all month for special Halloween presentations on Storylink Radio's YouTube channel as we count down to Halloween 2023. Keep a close eye on YouTube alerts or you'll miss one. Celebrate October with us right here and now. Tonight's presentation from Storylink Radio. Night of the KII. The moment he saw the package wrapped in brown paper on the dining room table, Matthew knew where it was from. First of all, it was a Friday, like it is today, and the packages always arrived on Fridays. They were always wrapped with coarse, strong twine, too. He set his school books on the table, lifted the heavy box. His name was neatly lettered in his mother's clear handwriting. "So you found it?" Matthew looked up. His grandmother was standing in the kitchen doorway, smiling. "Yeah, Gran. It feels like there's a lot of stuff in this one. I can't wait to get a look at what's inside." Matthew was very proud of his mother. His mother was a scientist, an anthropologist who studied the traditions of Native American people. For the past 3 years, his mom had spent several weeks each spring in the mountains near the site of an ancient village studying the history of a small, mysterious tribe of Choctaw people. Twice a month, she would send home a package of notes and objects that local people had given her to help with her work. Matthew wanted to be an anthropologist, too, when he grew up. And each year, when she came home, his mother had allowed Matthew to help her as she organized the material that she had collected on her trip. This year, he was entrusted with the job of opening each package and checking to see that everything had arrived in order. "Well, aren't you going to open it?" Gran asked. Matthew tugged the twine away, tore through the paper, and opened the box. Inside, there was a flat stone for grinding grain, a beaded necklace decorated with feathers, and a pipe carved from a single piece of grayish wood. Everything had been labeled, and Matthew checked each item against a list his mother had enclosed. But he was more interested in the two spiral notebooks on the bottom of the box. They contained his mother's notes. She'd been collecting stories from the descendant of a tribal medicine man, and most of the stories were pretty scary. Matthew sat down and opened the first book. It was mostly about the kinds of dwellings the Choctaw had built when they first settled in the mountains. When he opened the second notebook, he let out a low whistle. Tucked into the front was a colored pencil drawing of a strange-looking creature. The creature had a body, tall and muscular, and looked human, almost normal, except that it had very long fingers and toes tipped with a savage-looking curved claws. But the head sent a chill right through him. It was large and wolfish. Double rows of long, pointed teeth lined in the open jaws. At the front, a pair of dagger-like fangs overlapped the lower jaw. Black fur covered the creature's head and neck and ended like a shaggy collar over its shoulders. It was the eyes, though, that really caught Matthew's attention. They were wide and fiery red, with a thin slit of black at the center. He looked at the drawing from different angles, but the eyes always seemed to be looking right at him. The first page of the notebook explained that the beast was a type of legendary creature called the KWAN. Matthew read on about the legend of the creature. "Cool," he said under his breath when he had finished reading. "That will be perfect for tonight." His grandmother had returned to the kitchen. Matthew checked to see she was out of hearing range. And then he picked up the telephone and punched in a number. After a couple of rings, his friend Joey answered. "Joey, I got a package today," Matthew said softly. "Matt, is that you? How come you're whispering? I can hardly hear you." Matthew raised his voice a little. "I can't talk any louder. My grandmother's in the kitchen. I got a package today, and it's got a good story in it. It looks really creepy. You want to call the guys and tell them we're going to meet at the clearing?" Joey sounded hesitant. "I don't know, Matt. I almost got caught sneaking back in last time." "Oh, come on. Sneaking out is part of the fun," goaded Matthew. "The legend is about wolf people that devour their victims and chomp their bones into tiny bits." The phone line was silent for another moment. Then Joey croaked. "Wolf people?" "Yeah, with red eyes and long, sharp claws," Matthew coaxed. "Okay, count me in," Joey said. "I'll call the rest of the guys and I'll see you at midnight." At 11:30 that night, Matthew left his room, tiptoed past his snoring grandmother, and slipped out the front door. He ran to the end of the block and turned uphill and then into the woods. He had a small flashlight with him, but he really didn't need it. The moon was full, and he could have found his way to the clearing blindfolded. Matthew and his friends, Joey, Link, Ron, Zach, and Rick, had formed the Terror Society a year ago. At least once a month, they met at the clearing to tell stories. Scary stories. They had even tried to hold seances a couple of times to conjure up spirits of the dead. At first, Matt hadn't been very good at storytelling because he had a hard time making things up. But then he started telling the tales of the medicine man that he read in his mom's notes. Everyone got really scared, and now they met whenever a package arrived that contained a new tale of fright. As he neared the meeting place, Matthew could see a glimmer of light through the trees. He stepped into the clearing and saw that the others were already hunched around a small fire. Smiling to himself, Matthew decided to really set the stage for his story. That's right, he said aloud. He was pleased that the other boys jumped when he spoke. Stay as close to the fire as you can, because it's the only thing that they fear. It's the only thing that can protect you from them. From who? Zach faked being frightened. He was already into it. Matthew slowly approached the fire and stretched out his hands to warm them. He looked into the eyes of each boy one at a time, then he spoke in a hushed voice. The KII. They roam these very woods, hungry and thirsty, looking for a meal of tender human flesh and thirst-quenching blood. With the cunning of an animal and the cruelty of a human, they stalk helpless victims and tear them to shreds, even cracking open their bones to reach the marrow inside. His audience was hooked. Matthew continued on with the legend and adding a few frightening details of his own. And when he had finished, he paused for effect, then pulled his mother's drawing from his jacket. Behold, the face of the KII. It was a little dramatic, but it worked. Everyone gasped. In the firelight, the red eyes of the beast seemed to glitter. And all of a sudden, all of the boys broke out in nervous laughter. They took turns looking at the frightful drawing. Zach shivered. I'm not so sure I want to cut back through the woods if these guys are out there. Rick piped up. I want to meet them. Don't worry, Matthew assured him. They only hunt at night under the cover of fog. As you can see, gesturing toward the full moon, this doesn't seem to be their kind of night. Even so, the boys all walked back through the woods together and didn't split up until they were near their homes. 2 weeks later, another package arrived. Matthew was disappointed there were no more stories, but he did find another notebook. The handwriting was tiny and irregular, nothing like his mother's. The pages were filled with what seemed to be instructions. Some of the words were odd-sounding, but he did recognize the name. KII. It was repeated several times. Matthew read over the scrawled instructions a couple times and suddenly realized what it was. This was a spell to conjure up the KII. The whole book was filled with spells. This time, Matthew had no trouble at all convincing Joey to slip out. He simply told him that he had something better than a scary story. He had a notebook full of magic spells. That night, Matthew was so excited and anxious to try one of the spells that he was the first to arrive at the clearing. He took some time to gather up a pile of dry wood and started a fire, and one by one the others arrived. Link had brought along some face paint. I thought it would help the ritual, he explained, smearing a bold blue stripe on his cheek. The boys laughed and kidded each other as they painted their faces with lines and dots of color. Finally, Joey stood in front of the flickering fire and called the group to order. It's time! The preparations are complete. We must choose a spell. The other boys snickered, but then played along and set their faces in somber expressions. Then Ron turned to Matthew. What are our choices? As far as I can tell, Matthew answered, the easiest ones are bringing rain and finding an underground spring. Zach laughed out loud. Oh, great. Don't you have anything for finding treasures or something? Nope, Matthew said, still flipping through the notebook. That's it. The others look kind of, dangerous. Then it's rain, Link suggested. That'll be more fun than having to dig a well. The boys agreed and began to follow the instructions in the notebook word for word. They chanted the spell together and moved around the fire in a kind of clumsy dance until Joey stopped them. Quiet, he demanded. They all stood perfectly still. Did you hear that? It sounded like thunder. Oh, you're hearing things, Link laughed and elbowed his friend. Look, there isn't a cloud in the sky. Besides, I'm tired of this. What else is in that book? Isn't there anything scary? Matthew looked from one boy to the next. He didn't want to disappoint his friends. Well, there is one thing. That sounds too scary to me. What is it? Ron asked. Matthew bit his lower lip and hesitated. He wasn't really sure anymore that he wanted to do this. I mean, what if it worked? Well, there is a spell to call the KII. At first, no one spoke. And then Joey broke the silence. You mean those wolf monsters? Why would we want to bring them around here? Suddenly, Link laughed. Oh, come on, guys. This stuff doesn't really work. It's just goof. It's for fun. It's just for fun. Let's do the spell. Joey wasn't convinced. Yeah, but what if it does work? Link looked at his friend. We've been doing a rain dance for 15 minutes. Are you wet? Everyone laughed. Link was right. Let's do it, they shouted. Then they huddled around the fire and carefully recited each part of the spell for the KII. Nothing happened. Maybe we ought to dance around for this one, too. Ron joked and whirled around. As the other boys laughed, he whirled faster, then tripped and tumbled toward the fire. He fell heavily. You okay? Matthew asked. Yeah. Ron sat up. He held his hand out toward the fire. I think I might have cut my hand on that piece of wood, though. Oh. A drop of blood formed on the side of Ron's hand and dripped onto one of the heated rocks that ringed the fire pit. As it hit, the blood spattered and sizzled. A tiny puff of steam rose from the rock and swirled toward the woods. As the boys watched, the puff expanded and developed into a dense fog. What's going on? Joey sounded frightened. I don't know, Matthew said. Maybe we should go. But before they could take another step, there was a rustling sound in the woods. The boys backed up toward the fire. In the deepening fog, they could see dozens of pairs of glowing red eyes. It's them, Ron moaned in terror. It's the KII. We brought them here. A deep, vicious snarl rose from the shadows. What are we going to do? Joey was almost in tears. Does it say anything about how to make them go away? Matthew flipped through the book. I don't see anything, he said, beginning to panic. Then suddenly remembered something. But the first legend said that they won't come near the fire. We have to keep the fire going. There's plenty of wood. But if we keep the fire going till sunrise, we can hold them off. That's right, Joey sounded hopeful. I remember you said something about that. All we have to do is... He suddenly stopped. Listen, he whispered. Oh no, Link groaned. It worked. That stupid rain dance we were doing. It worked. The thunder rolled again, and the first drops of rain spattered down and dimmed and left them alone in the thickening fog. You've just heard tonight's story from Storylink Radio's Countdown to Halloween 2023. Remember to come back for our next tale. Many more stories of all genres available to listen to and read along with now on our website at www.storylinkradio.com. Visit our YouTube channel at youtube.com/storylinkradio. And visit our podcast for easy mobile listening anywhere, anytime. Just search for Storylink Radio on your favorite podcast provider. Oh, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and click that alert bell for Storylink Radio.